You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo, bringing you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. Today, we have Assembly Member Ed Ra, that was first elected to the Assembly in November of 2010, where he now represents the constituents of the 19th New York State Assembly's district. The district he serves includes portions of all three Nassau County major towns, from New Hyde Park to Brookville, including right here at Nassau Community College. Assemblyman Ra currently serves as ranking minority member of the Assembly Ways and Means Committee and is also the ranking minority member of the Education Committee. And those are all the reasons why we're happy to welcome him to the show right now. Thank you, sir, for joining us. I know you're busy.
Well, thank you for having me.
Appreciate you being here, especially whenever we can get a rep of the college. Certainly, we won't hesitate to pat the college ourselves on the back a little bit, but certainly want to get to a number of the other things in the news this week, and obviously that you're focused on in Albany for your constituents. But we do want to start, as usual, with a new guest with just kind of a recap of your own experiences, both professionally in governance and personally even, dealing with this COVID crisis and the response and the recovery.
Sure. Well, I mean, government, just like everybody else, had to find ways to, reinvent the way we do things. If you had told me, last January, February, that we were going to figure out ways to have assembly session where people were going to be on Zoom. I don't think I knew what Zoom was back then. Right. Most people probably didn't. So there was kind of the practical side of how we continue to govern. Much has been talked about, the governor's, enhanced emergency powers and all of that. But if you think back to the time when that first came about, there really was uncertainty whether the legislature would be able to meet regularly if we were going to be in a situation where, people are being exposed to COVID, having to quarantine. So we kind of had to start to figure that out. Thankfully, by the time we passed the budget at the end of March, early April, we kind of had come up with this just kind of voting system in shifts in the assembly chamber, and afterwards, our tech people, thankfully, were able to figure out how to continue our session later on in the spring, over Zoom and stuff. But I would say, as a representative, the issues we were dealing with in the office with my staff who were working remotely for a while, especially at the beginning, it was people that needed to get tests, whether it was for work purposes or because they had been exposed. And we all know how difficult it was to get tested for COVID during those early days. And then obviously, a lot of people losing jobs and having trouble, getting in touch with the New York State Department of Labor, who were just inundated with applications. And I would say the lion's share of the work that me and my staff were doing, during March, April, May, even into June, we're trying to process those claims and get that taken care of for people so that they had the support they needed to be able to pay for the basic necessities in their lives.
Of course.
Yes. So it was definitely definitely a unprecedented time, and I would never compare what we were doing to the people that were truly out on the front lines. They were the heroes and keeping us going, and we were just trying to do our small part to help the constituents of the district.
That's an important message, and certainly, like you said, constituent services is important in good times, but when there's a crisis like this, whether it's unemployment, and I know we talked to Newsday's Victor Ocasio, the labor reporter, recently about that issue, a lot of the scams that came around it too that people are still dealing with, right. And a number of the other issues like food insecurity and social services and just practical pieces of information and getting good information when there's so much disinformation out there around the whole pandemic. I know that I'm sure you participate in a lot of different web kind of events and town halls and stuff like that. So it has been very interesting to see how electeds have been able to adapt and try to do what they can to help support, like you said, those frontline workers and everyone else going through tough times.
And one of the things I always say for a lot of people, they're used to their interactions with government, maybe being more on the side of, okay, I'm doing something with my house, I got to file a permit or things of that nature. For many, many, many people, they were in a situation they never imagined, which was that they would be relying on that support from some of the, safety net programs that we have in our state. Trying to just help them through that process and make sure their benefits got flowing was essential.
Most definitely. And it wasn't just individuals, but I know a big part of the recovery that you've been focused on is supporting the local businesses. I know we've talked about it with a number of different elected officials and folks from out here on Long Island, and Bill's a part of the musician and artist community out here. We know how much they were hurting, from the pandemic and restaurants and everything else. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of those things that you think have, sort of made the difference? And I know there's a lot of things both in the budget, and we'll get into that more, that you might disagree with, but also there was a lot of programs that, seem to be funding that hopefully help these small business local owners.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was, a couple sides to this. Early on, there was just, when everything was shut down, just a lot of businesses reaching out and saying, okay, hey, what can I do? Am I, because as much as you're trying to put out a list, okay, this is what's essential, this is not, these different things come about. Well, I do this, or I work with this entity, and it helps really keep them moving. So there was a lot of back and forth between the business community, our offices, and really the governor's office to try to figure some of that stuff out early on. And then certainly as we got into the spring and summer with reopenings and, trying to answer questions, get information as to what was expected, say, of a restaurant. Okay, now you can do your outdoor seating or do 50% indoors. Okay, what do I need to do? What partitions do I have to put out? And there was, just a lot of questions out there to try to answer for those businesses, and then certainly trying to find different ideas of ways to support them, because as much as there were frustrations with the federal government not coming back around to that second stimulus, because it was kind of hanging out there for a very long time before they did what they did in December, and then obviously in March. I do think the early programs, PPP and things like that, were a lifeline for a lot of those businesses. But again, there were a lot of questions. Okay, I submitted this application. I'm reading in the news that it's running out of money. Am I going to get what I need to keep my employees on payroll and everything? So we started thinking about, though, at the state level at that time, obviously a state is very different from the federal government in terms of budgeting. And, we don't really have the ability to do like a stimulus, so to speak. But we started talking about how do we take some of the resources that are already there and redirect them, take some of, the monies that we tend to push towards the more major economic development programs and push that towards, smaller business relief. How do we look at maybe some regulatory burdens that might need to be loosened and help out? You look at some of the things that were loosened, like with bars and restaurants when they were only doing takeout, and really still to this day, they started saying, okay, maybe they could have do a little bit of to-go alcohol. It's another little thing. Maybe it gets them a few extra dollars on an order. So yeah, it was it was a time that we were just trying to find ways to do anything we could to support the businesses that I think are the backbones of our communities and support all our local organizations.
Definitely.
Yeah. I read recently, it might have been a Newsday article, but somewhere around the neighborhood of 80,000 jobs that were on Long Island have not returned yet. Whether they're going to or not is a whole nother question. You guys must have had your hands full, because it was almost like every eatery had their own kind of situation that needed to be addressed, because it either didn't fall easily under, the thing I felt bad about was a lot of restaurants did put up, like you said, partitions. They spent all of this money to kind of, let's make it okay. And then the next day, the percentage of people they were allowed in was cut, or it was changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
And the other thing that people don't realize is so many of these restaurants were simply not prepared to do takeout food.
The catering halls, I know you've talked about certain models.
Yeah, I mean,
others.
They had to change their business model. They had to retrain people to package the foods that they normally put on a plate.
Yeah.
And, that was a lot of things.
Yeah, like you said, there was a lot of frustration with people just not, owners, managers, not necessarily knowing what was expected. And, sometimes we'd get, okay, the governor would announce a change in capacity or a change in some type of restriction, but the actual guidance on how to do it wasn't necessarily there till the 11th hour, and they were saying, hey, I don't know how many more days I can afford to lose. So that was a frustration. But you're right, it really becomes a different business at that point when you're doing primarily takeout. I mean, I know somebody was telling me the other day about a steakhouse in their area, they don't want to throw their food in,
no,
they put it out,
no,
it's not designed to do that,
Yeah.
But, they're trying to find ways, maybe put in new menu offerings that maybe travel better. It really was totally reinventing many of these businesses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it created a few cottage industries. I mean, we had the, Uber Eats and those kinds of things. So some people are actually making a go of it being, doing the deliveries.
Yeah,
which,
Yeah. And just to pick up on a point that you did mention, Assemblymember Ra, that I know a lot of the business owners, and we've talked also about this with the Health Commissioner of Nassau County, Dr. Larry Eisenstein, and also, with the county executive and others. And we know that, it was science-based, but a lot of people felt that these changes could be arbitrary, and, the terms capricious were tossed around. And, like you said, even if they were based, to a large extent in science, that the way that they were communicated, I think, was a big part of the problem, and led to a lot of those frustrations. So I know the executive orders have, and you did touch on them, have been kind of modified, and we can go into that now. But can you talk about that, and I guess maybe why that was kind of relevant to that conversation about executive orders and powers?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, at the beginning, like I said, there wasn't, we didn't know what was going to be. This was an unprecedented situation. Obviously, really nobody that's alive right now has lived through something quite like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think at the beginning, when the legislature first did that, I certainly didn't ever imagine that there would be these executive orders that touched on, dozens of different areas in them, and then you'd be wading through them and then, extending them and all that other stuff. But there was definitely frustrations with maybe some inconsistencies. I mean, one of the ones you heard very often from, a lot of our local Main Street businesses was, hey, I'm not allowed to be open, but, people can be in Costco and Target and Walmart, and I sell everything they sell, but they have obviously a wider variety of offerings. Why can they open and I can't? And I think it got to the point last spring that a lot of people felt like, okay, I know there was a time when we said, okay, what's essential, what's not, but maybe the conversation needs to be broader than that. Maybe the conversation needs to be, what can we do safely, and who had a more vested interest in keeping their customers safe, than a business owner. They, especially with the fear that was out there, I don't think, a business owner wanted to just open their doors and have their customers feel unsafe, because I don't think they weren't going to come back if they didn't feel safe going into their whatever, whether it was a bar or restaurant or some type of local shop. Mm-hmm. So I think that became definitely a source of frustration, and many of us in the legislature too, as we were relaying what we were hearing from businesses in our districts, didn't think we were fully getting the ear of the executive when we were asking for modifications to some of these things, and that really kind of started the push to at least roll back the idea of the governor having that level of control. And like you said, I think communication is important, and obviously, Governor Cuomo had, at the height of things, I mean, he was out there every day and communicating on a lot of different things, but I think there was a little less transparency as to some of the restrictions and really just laying out. I think people are smart. People want information, and if you when say they put in the restaurant curfew and said they all have to be closed by 10 o'clock, people wanted to hear, well, you know what, we have data that whatever it is, maybe people have had a couple drinks, whatever that, but we're seeing a huge uptick in incidents with bars and restaurants after a certain time, so that's why we're doing this. And they really didn't have that. It was just kind of thrown out there.
I see what you mean. Yeah, a bit of a take our word and, trust the scientists, but not really maybe giving people the explanation and a kind of layman's point of view that was a little bit more easy to kind of understand. Let's just remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and joined thankfully here with by Assembly Member Ed Ra, again from the 19th District of Nassau County. So in terms of, again, those executive orders, can you just give us a little bit of a status kind of update? Because we know that, obviously there's been multiple investigations on multiple fronts that have been going on to the governor in terms of both the nursing home data kind of reporting issues and obviously allegations of personal sexual harassment and other types of related kind of claims. So those are two separate things, I guess. But in terms of the executive orders, was there a discussion now? I thought the legislature was trying to kind of have more of a say in terms of the policies and practice. So can you just let listeners know about where that stands?
Yeah. So, I mean, as of really in early March, there were some efforts made to, and I would have just completely gotten rid of the system we were under and kind of made it a little more of an affirmative duty on the executive to get approval from the legislature when one of these orders is extended. But what the legislative majority has actually passed basically would allow the governor not to issue any new directives, really, which are kind of the quasi-law, making authority that the governor had, but modify existing directives. But he had to basically let the legislature know, in particular, either the legislative leaders or the relevant committee chairs, some health-based reasoning why he's extending a certain thing.
Okay.
Now, the problem that I've seen in practice, which is kind of what I saw coming, is that they now have this whole spreadsheet that's up on you can get on the governor's website, but I mean, it's very conclusory. It's not data. It's conclusions that this is necessary for health and safety. The thing that I find funny, I was saying a couple weeks ago, and thankfully now this one is getting going away. But the governor, the same exact written justification for extending the curfew on bars and restaurants, word for word, was the same exact reasoning for lifting it for gyms and bowling alleys and other entities.
Yeah, I saw you post about that.
So that, that to me didn't provide a ton of information. And the thing too, we'll see now as this goes on is there is an opportunity for that to be a two-way dialogue. So once the governor gives that information now to those committee chairs, legislative leaders, they do have the opportunity to comment. And now if that order comes back up for renewal again, then the executive, they don't really have to do anything with the comments, but they do have to respond to them in some way. So perhaps as we get into the next round of extensions of any of these that are still around, we may see a little bit more of what commentary was passed along by the legislative leaders in the legislature and what the response from the governor and the Department of Health are.
Okay. So, I understand your point when it comes to that matter. And I know Bill and me were talking before because we were reading, I think you were quoted in an article recently, and other Assembly, especially Republican members, were kind of calling for a little more in terms of the investigations, both kind of maybe oversight or, kind of it being expedited a bit, seeming that there were some concerns about it kind of stagnating. I know, again, there's, and just clarify too, that there's the Attorney General's investigation, but there's also something going on in the Assembly that I believe Long Island's Assembly member, I believe Charles Levine also is directly, kind of at the helm. Yes. So could you lay out again that for the listeners, where that stands? Any thoughts?
So as you mentioned, there was a number of different issues here. There's the nursing homes. There's the obviously the sexual harassment allegations, and then there are a couple of little other things with the governor's book deal, and whether employees of the governor's office were kind of mandated or winking a nod. I need you to do research so I can get this book out. And then even a little bit of some controversy surrounding the new Tappan Zee Bridge as well. So
Governor Mario
a lot
Cuomo,
of this,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't recognize the term.
No, just clarifying for the radio
Yes.
audience who couldn't see the smirk, maybe. Of course, I hear you.
But so the Attorney General has her inquiry ongoing. And then the New York State Assembly Judiciary Committee, which, as you said, is chaired by Chuck Levine, who was my assembly colleague from just to the north of my district, has started an investigation. They have an outside law firm that was hired, and supposedly they are, taking information. And I mean, I'd like some idea of what's going on. I'm not as surprised that it's been tight-lipped because, if you're talking to people who are making allegations, I think a lot of that has to happen in a setting where you want to make sure that people are being completely, forthright with you and aren't feeling like, they're going to have it, put out in public. In particular, there's been some talk that there may be other accusers who have, called into. There's a hotline that was set up, but don't, necessarily want their name out in the press. But it is, a couple of months into this now. And there's really the public side of it was basically a meeting where they introduced these attorneys. And then I think they had one other meeting. So we're getting near the end of the legislative session. And just for people to be aware, the reason that's going on in the Assembly as opposed to the Senate, just like really in Washington, it's the Assembly, the larger house of the legislature that has the impeachment authority under our state law and state constitution. That if we were to get proper information and decide that the governor's conduct rose to that level, it would be the Assembly that would have that vote.
Thank you, for clarifying that. Bill, I thought, did you have a question specifically to that?
No. I mean, that's good to know. I didn't realize that.
Oh. Okay.
I think. Well, one of the things that I'm interested in is the New York American Water.
Definitely.
Water is going to be. I remember when I was back in college, and I went late, so that's not that many years ago. There was a thing about resource wars, that our future was going to be full of that kind of thing. And as I see it coming down, you read it in the paper all the time, and I don't know if he said it or he didn't say it, but the head of Nestle was, and that's Poland spring water. And they're apparently going around the world raiding these water supplies because they get free water, get to put it in a bottle and sell it. Those are scary things when you think about it. Also, the idea that New York and the surrounding states here, we only have 13 water treatment plants. And yet, every other day I read about a new development might go up on Long Island with 500 units of this. And we're adding more and more people to a system that's it's beginning to show its stress.
Can be overburdened, of course.
Yeah. And of course, in an atmosphere like that, who's ever at the reins, the amount of money they can charge when services get critical. This is so. I'd like to to hear what you have to say about the New York water thing.
Talking about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and just to the broader point, Long Island, single source aquifer. We've identified all these emerging contaminants in recent years. Thankfully,
PFOA.
New York State had kind of led before the federal government in establishing, acceptable levels of some of these things. But they are extremely expensive to treat. It's not like a filter. 1,4-dioxane. It's this reverse osmosis process.
Oh yeah,
so
the Grumman plume.
Yeah, the Grumman plume. So very technical processes that are expensive. And the state has been putting a lot of money into clean water infrastructure. But tying back to New York American Water, there's one little piece of the frustration with a private entity that is controlling an essential resource for those areas. New York State put again and has the last few years $500 million into clean water infrastructure. The residents in New York American Water service areas can't benefit from that because they're serviced by a private entity. But the broader point with them, the rates are exorbitant. Obviously, a huge part of it is that they're a private entity and they're paying taxes that the municipal water districts, throughout Nassau don't have to pay. And we're kind of at a tipping point here because New York American Water has this sale agreed to with a new entity, Liberty, and we've been trying to hold that at bay, and finally put ourselves on the path to municipal water. The state Senate passed a bill a few weeks ago to create a Nassau County Water Authority. The Assembly passed similar but different legislation to create a North and South Shore Water Authority. And, we've been trying to find common ground and get something across the finish line so we can put ourselves in a situation that we can actually start to look at. There are other water districts in areas that are willing to step in and either take over parts of the service area or at least contract with an entity to do kind of the day-to-day operations, and that's where we need to get because this is water we're talking about.
Yeah.
This private entity didn't put it there. They didn't invent it, and it is an essential thing that should not be subject to a for-profit entity.
Okay, yeah, no, good to know your thoughts on that. I know there's a little bit of disagreement when it comes to, I believe, the town of Hempstead and some of the other municipalities that might have to, bear some of the responsibility and cost if it goes municipal. But obviously, a lot of legislators on Long Island, both houses, have certainly been, echoing and mirroring your position on that as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think the important thing, in whatever we pass is there needs to be a little bit of flexibility there because, like, where the area I represent on the North Shore, that service area has Jericho next door, and Jericho has kind of, we've looked at this. They may be interested in managing the day-to-day, but they don't want to own the infrastructure. As opposed to, I was talking with some of my colleagues on the South Shore, and I think it's East Farmingdale or somewhere in the Massapequas. There's a very small area that's serviced by New York American Water, and that neighboring district is willing to fully take that over, part and parcel. So, we want to get everybody to municipalization, but I think we need that level of flexibility to find the right way to get there. For each of these areas and get them out from under this private entity.
That makes a lot of sense. And I had heard, and me and Bill were listening to it, your recent interview, I believe, on LI Radio News. And, you were talking about that the average ratepayer doesn't care about how the sausage is made and how they eventually get to the positive result, which is hopefully lower rates and, more accountability and more representation, in this vital life, needing resource. Go ahead, though.
And for a product that's not going to kill them.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the whole idea, and making sure that it's safe, knowing, like you said, all these concerns about emerging contaminants and everything else, related. And I did just want to clarify, I think the bill you were talking about that passed the Senate, was that I believe the GARN, I think it was like S989A, right? That's the one that had moved. And I know you had, if I'm not mistaken, a bill, I think it was A04389, which was to, I guess, establish a Long Island Office of Department Public Service to basically kind of be some form of watchdog or oversight. So could you talk about that maybe and how that would play? And I know we've talked to Mark Harrington, a Newsday reporter, and, I didn't realize, again, that, when it came to the topic of Somerset East, that PSEG and a lot of these things were exempt from PSC oversight. So talk about how maybe that might have some role maybe also in helping constituents and Long Islanders.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's been a frustration, whether it's with New York American Water, whether it's PSEG over the years, and customers feeling like they have a voice in those types of proceedings, because that's who's approving rate hikes and all that type of stuff. So this was a bill that myself and my colleague Missy Miller actually put in last summer after the storm, because we do think that there needs to be more direct oversight of the Long Island utilities, and in particular make sure that you have somebody whose really role is looking out directly for the ratepayer. And that's the very simple idea of that bill. There's been a piece of legislation kicking around the Assembly for years to create a more like statewide office of, I think it's called the Utility Consumer Advocate.
Mm-hmm.
It's passed in the legislature, but the governor has not been on board with it. So the idea was maybe to look and push for something more on the local level, in particular because PSEG is kind of carved out from the level of oversight that some of the other entities have.
Okay. So that's good to know. And we just want to remind our listeners, obviously, we only have a few last minutes of your time here, and we obviously thank you for it. But we are listening again to this week's Long Island News here with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and Assembly Member Ed Ra. And another just piece of legislation, I did want to give you opportunity just to mention any events that your office is kind of focused on or sponsoring or co-sponsoring coming up. But I know there was another bill that me and Bill were talking about that you would think sponsored that seems like it could be a bipartisan that everyone on Island could get behind, which was basically some form of a rebate for folks who are going through cancer treatments. And, if there was cost that was out of pocket, could potentially be, maybe kind of compensated for. So certainly want folks to look into that bill and that type of policy, because that's the type of stuff, Bill and I like to talk about cooler heads prevailing and finding points of kind of commonality. And I think, around water and things like, combating cancer and dealing with the medical billing and health issues that thankfully, we see a lot of, again, kind of bipartisanship. So just wanted to give that a little bit of a plug. And if you want to say something about that and then any other events, I guess, that your office or things that you're focusing on.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's, it's something that's personal to me. I had a friend came to me talking about it whose wife was going through cancer treatments, but I've certainly been impacted by it in my life, and, lost my mother, when she was 57 years old when I lost her, and she, so it really is just a simple thing to maybe help with some of the out-of-pocket expenses of, We're fortunate, right, that we have all these great medical institutions, right, both here on Long Island and Manhattan and stuff, but, driving back and forth, tolls, occasionally maybe even hotel stays and things like that, so the idea of it is just to get a little bit of help to deal with some of what those patients and their family members and caregivers are going through.
Yep, most
I love to hear it. Something for the little guy. That's
I think
always good news. It's always good news.
Can relate to that on a personal level, especially out here on Long Island. So I just wanted to say that bill number, I believe, again, is A04450. If anyone wants to go look that up, they certainly can do that. And
Assemblyman, as I always do, I'm just going to ask you that in the future, if you'll come back and talk to us again, we're kind of pressed for time. So sure. I know we could always extend these conversations. We could go on for 6 hours.
Absolutely.
Not a problem.
I enjoy talking about this stuff, and you guys were great. And so I'd love to do it again.
Great.
Yep. Look forward to it. So thank you.
We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
And of course, you can follow the Assembly member on social media, and obviously his information for the constituent services and other things are also available online. So thank you again, Assembly Member Ra. Appreciate your time.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Be safe.
Thank you.
Well. Take care. You too. Have a good weekend.
Take care.
Let's go Islanders, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Got to get in there some way.
Absolutely.
And now joining us from Newsday is Alfonso Castillo. How are you doing, Alfonso?
I'm good, guys. Thank you for having me on again.
No, thank you for coming back. We see all the stories about projected things for the railroad, and so you're the guy. What's going on?
There's a number of things. So I think maybe we'll start with some of the things that I think caught the most headlines when you see things of a 200 mile per hour, potential
bullet trains.
Bullet train being involved on Long Island. I think that caught a lot of the headlines along with the Penn Station upgrade. So maybe let's start there. Let's start with the conversation. I believe it was the North Atlantic Rail Initiative, which is being discussed.
The grand plans.
Exactly. You want to talk about to the listeners what you've found in your reporting and what's being discussed right now as a potential, we'll say.
Yeah, very much a potential, far from a done deal right now, and certainly a lot of skepticism around this plan. Essentially, there is a consortium of planners, builders, some elected officials who are proposing a $105 billion with a B new high-speed rail system that would link New York to Boston, and a key part of that project would be running this new rail system across Long Island and then across the Sound via a tunnel that would begin in Port Jefferson and connect over to Bridgeport. And, as you mentioned, trains would be going up to 200 miles an hour, not through Long Island, I should note, but certainly a lot faster than what Long Island is used to now with the Long Island Railroad. A lot of tunneling would be involved. In addition to the tunnel across the Sound, there'd be smaller tunnels throughout the island. They'd also look to build a new East River tunnel connecting to Penn Station. So, this is really unlike anything, not just the region, but really the country has seen in a long time in terms of the scope of what they're talking about. And for a comparison, East Side Access, which is by far the biggest transportation project that our region's taken on in a long, long time. It's dragged on over the last 15 years. That's about $11 billion. So you're talking about 10 East Side Access.
Oh my God.
I mean, the Big Dig in Boston, it's hard to find anything that comes even close in terms of a price tag and scope. So that in and of itself, as you can imagine, has caused a lot of skepticism, but the people behind it are really undeterred, and they do have a track record. Bob Yarrow, who is on the steering committee, and really kind of driving this project forward, used to be president of the Regional Plan Association. And as he noted, whether it was East Side Access or the Second Avenue Subway or the Pine Barrens or the third track on the Long Island Railroad, he, as part of the RPA, really were at the forefront of these projects, and they were all met with that similar kind of skepticism for a long, long time. And as you all know, those are all either done or almost done. And he seems similarly confident about this one, with the caveat, the understanding that this is much bigger than any of those.
Yeah, that's an important point to definitely point out. And I know in the headline itself, it was posed as fantasy or unrealistic.
Isn't every great idea met that same way though? I mean, I'm not saying it's a great idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea.
No, I know what you mean. But when they built, whether it's the Empire State Building,
grandiose plans,
the bridges, I'm sure of the early 20th century. People probably said, "Oh man, that's too much money, and that's not worth the effort." But now try to do without some of those bridges connecting into Manhattan, or again, a lot of these other infrastructure projects that you've obviously discussed, Alfonso. Go ahead.
They're seizing on what they see as an opportunity, with a lot of kind of stars lining up. For one, obviously, you've got a presidential administration that has been historically friendly to transportation projects and high-speed rail projects. Joe Amtrak, as they call him, Joe Biden, is a very big fan of rail. He's got this $2 trillion infrastructure proposal. They're hoping this could be, the centerpiece of that as far as the rail part of it. But it's worth noting, in that infrastructure proposal, as it is right now, the entire allotment toward rail spending throughout the whole country is $80 billion. So,
wow.
And again, they're asking for $105 billion for one project.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what else was in the pipeline that they're looking at as potential alternatives to spend the money on. But
that's the thing is that, this group would even be competing theoretically with the MTA, with Amtrak for some of that money. So
a lot of RFPs.
So they've found a lot of support already. I mean, as I mentioned in the story, Suffolk County Executive Steve Bellone, big supporter of the project. Some others too, Congressman Swazi, the mayor of Hartford, I believe, is one of the co-chairs of the effort. So they've got a lot of support in that sense, but it might be hard to find support from some of these other organizations that they'd essentially be competing with. MTA looks at that federal money and thinks, well, how about all the stuff that we need and other projects that are already underway and, aren't kind of, these wishful thinking kind of projects, but stuff that's already in the pipeline. So it's going to be tough. As you mentioned, maybe there's kind of a plan B, a compromise, something that would accomplish some of these goals, maybe not as ambitious as everything they're looking at. It's worth mentioning that Amtrak has said that they do intend, they're considering running service onto Long Island in the future. So the idea of being able to take a train from Ronkonkoma or Hicksville and go to Boston is not that far-fetched. I mean, it's absolutely something that could be in the future. Whether it means building a new tunnel under the Cross Sound, that remains to be seen.
Well, there's a question. I remember I was around and I was actually in construction when they were doing the Second Avenue subway, and I couldn't find where could they find enough room to put another tunnel under Manhattan. It boggles my mind. It really does. But now, John and I were talking about, obviously the ridership is down on the Long Island Railroad now, and we can consider that because of the existing conditions now. The planners of this have obviously taken the tack that we're going to need the railroads, no matter what.
Yeah, very kind of counterintuitive, and it was my thought too when I first heard this proposal. In some ways, you'd think it's the worst possible time to be proposing a rail expansion because ridership is so depressed, and by a lot of projections will be for some time. The MTA I think is looking at 2025 to get back to about 80 to 90% of their ridership. But the people behind the North Atlantic Rail Project, they make the point that it's not just about how many people are taking the train, but it's about where they're taking the train to. And they say that some of the changes in commuting patterns that we've undergone over the pandemic actually works to their benefit, because what you're seeing more often is, yes, fewer people are going to the office every day. You've lost a lot of those Monday through Fridays 9-to-5ers. But what you've also seen is because of that, because people are working more remotely, they are living further from the office, right? So you've got a lot more people who are relocating to further distances where maybe housing prices are more affordable. So maybe making fewer trips to the office, but making them over longer distances. So
that's interesting.
In a situation like this, you could have somebody who works on Long Island and maybe commutes to a job much further away, in Connecticut or something like that.
Oh yeah. It's like we said. The initial thing is that the ridership is down on Long Island Railroad, but the building trend is to put apartment buildings and multiple unit places right along the railroad.
Right.
The idea, and some of these places didn't even make any consideration of no parking lots. Mm-hmm. If you want to live here, that's fine, but leave your car somewhere else. We don't want to deal with it. So that would tell you that somebody thinks the railroads are going to be necessary. And if those kinds of living conditions take hold, we'll all be using the railroad.
Yeah, it's a transit-oriented development that everybody's talking about now.
Of course, and we did talk about it with the Long Island Railroad Chairman, Phil Eng, recently, in terms of the walkability and still the idea of, building for the future, which, regardless of what capacity and how long it takes, is still going to be part of the lifeblood of Long Island for commuters, for workers, for a lot of folks who certainly rely on it now and will go back into the system hopefully soon. But I guess I did want to ask you specifically, Alfonso. I did hear yesterday, I know it was reported, it wasn't Long Island Railroad, but it was still Metro North, that they were expanding that down to City Island, was my understanding, which was pretty interesting. So I guess, is that kind of a similar argument to, why, the need for maybe Amtrak or, theoretically this larger expansion plan? Like you said, trying to get workers from maybe up in the Hudson Valley down to the Bronx, or getting people in Long Island from here to, maybe the Hudson Valley or wherever, people can kind of work in a more kind of flexible, maybe future, I guess. Is that part of the process of their thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's all part of a broader vision for expanding a rail access and transit options throughout the whole region. I've been on this beat now, I don't know, 13 years. And just in the last couple of years, it's amazing how many projects are going on concurrently, all of them looking to expand rail access, and more than just pipe dreams. These are projects that are well underway in a lot of ways. And now you have the latest being the Penn Station access plan that yesterday the governor announced was kind of rejuvenated. Now, this was already in the works and had been in the works for some time. With the pandemic, the MTA paused a lot of these big infrastructure projects that were going on just because of lack of funding. So it was more than a year ago that they were ready to kind of move ahead with this plan, hire the firms to build it out. Pandemic came, all that was put on hold, along with the entire capital program. And yesterday they announced that it's kind of back on. They're ready to begin the process of selecting a firm. To explain, I mean, what this would be would be linking Metro North to Penn Station around the same time that Long Island Railroad would be linking to Grand Central Terminal, Metro North's home. The thought is with Long Island Railroad moving to Grand Central, it'll clear up some capacity at Penn Station. Long Island Railroad is not leaving Penn Station, but they would be running fewer trains there because they'd have two different Manhattan terminals. And MTA is looking at that opportunity to link Metro North into Penn Station. And yeah, I think a big selling point for that project, certainly for a lot of lawmakers, stakeholders in the Bronx and upstate, is this plan to build 4 new Metro North stations along the Bronx on the New Haven line. These are areas that sometimes are called, transit deserts, not a lot of options. And the idea is just to increase connectivity for everyone. I over the years, something that I know some folks don't like to bring up too much, there has been a lot of concern among some folks on Long Island about what this means to Long Island Railroad riders. Penn's already got Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, Long Island Railroad, 6 subway lines, and you'd be putting another railroad in there. Again, the thinking is you'll have some extra capacity with Long Island Railroad moving to Grand Central. But some people are still concerned about, what this means in terms of adding.
There seems to be. I'm wondering though. You mentioned Metro North, and when I just visualized the Metro North system, it's totally different than the Long Island Railroad. Is there some standardization built into, a lot of these projects? In other words, can the trains from Long Island could they run on Metro North tracks, or are they going to do any of that? Not as they exist now. I mean, I think it would be doable, but yeah, you'd need to make some infrastructure upgrades. But there are so many tracks at Penn Station, and some are used primarily by Long Island Railroad exclusively, and some are used exclusively by New Jersey Transit and Amtrak. The big thing is how they connect, how they get power, right? Yeah, so Long Island Railroad gets it from the third rail. And I believe Metro North does also, but it's a different kind of third rail shoe, the way it connects. And then you also have, I know with Amtrak, and I think maybe with New Jersey Transit as well, overhead catenary wires. So. I imagine that some of the work that's got to go on is making sure that Metro North can run on those tracks, but they're all connected, so
maybe there is some potential, hopefully cost saving and, compatibility. Like you said, maybe if it does take some retrofitting, but let's remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully joined again by Newsday's transit reporter, Alfonso Castillo. And, I wanted to, because that segued into the other article that you wrote about, which was the upgrades to Penn Station. I know, we've talked to you about that in the past, before even the pandemic, and there were some discussions about what that was going to be. But it looks like some planned improvements between maybe $7 to $10 billion could be completed by 2028. But that would be separate than what we were just talking about, right, in terms of any of those track modifications, or just lay it out again, what the reporting talked about.
There's so much work going on and proposed around there, in addition to some work that we've already seen completed. Late last year, we saw the opening of the Moynihan Train Hall right across the street from Penn Station, which is spectacular. I don't know if you've seen it. Really,
it's beautiful.
It's something to see.
Very aesthetic.
And then also Long Island Railroad opened what they call their East End Gateway in Penn Station, which is a very kind of vibrant new entrance on 33rd Street right in front of Madison Square Garden. You go up the escalator, you're looking right at Empire State Building. So a lot of work's already underway, and then there's a lot more work planned. I've also written about this plan to expand Penn Station by buying the block just south of it, and adding some new tracks that would actually add capacity to run more trains into Penn Station. But this project that I most recently talked about really is about not so much expanding what is there as much as fixing what is there. And it's essentially a renovation of the existing Penn Station. And there are a lot of big ideas. Basically there's two different plans. One would keep the configuration essentially how it is right now with two floors and move some things around. The other plan, I think, is a lot more ambitious, and the MTA has kind of signaled that this is the one that they would like to do because you get more out of it. And essentially it would be knocking down the ceiling from the second floor, eliminating a lot of the floor space on the upper level, which is Amtrak's level and New Jersey Transit. And that way you'd have a 2-story kind of mega station, much more open space than you have now. There are, especially right now, I don't know if you've been to Penn Station lately, if you're a little taller than I am, you might have to bend over later to bend over inside Penn Station because the ceilings are so low. And the idea is to really blow them out. You get, in some places, 100-foot ceilings. There's a taxiway that runs right under Madison Square Garden that really isn't used. And they would take that, build that into a train hall. So you would have, a natural light. You'd have the sun shining down onto the Long Island Railroad Concourse and potentially all the way down on to the tracks, which is something that commuters haven't seen since the original Penn Station was demolished back in the 1960s.
I think that would be much appreciated when you feel like you're in the caves of underneath the belly of Penn Station. And we've looked at the renderings, and we certainly recommend everyone, if they haven't seen it either, yet rather, to go look on Newsday and go follow Alfonso's reporting, obviously. Where you can see these amazing renderings. They kind of remind me a little bit, again, I know they're just renderings, but of what they did over by the World Trade Center, where it's all glass and it's all very modern looking and super clean. And I don't know how long it would stay that way, even if it came to reality, but it's certainly, I think, people can appreciate, like you said, a little bit of sunlight and, maybe, I don't know if there'd be any modifications to MSG along the way, but certainly, I think everyone would be in favor of it. It just always comes down to cost and, like you said, the priorities and everything else. But okay. So I guess, in terms of that, like you said, that all, though, is am I correct? That is in the works, right? That is, like you said.
Right now that's still kind of in a planning stage. The MTA is taking the lead on all this. They just put forward these proposals. Ultimately, they're going to have to confer with Amtrak, which owns Penn Station, and New Jersey Transit, which also operates there, and they're going to have to kind of decide on a plan. There have been some indications that they're not all necessarily on the same page about how to do this. As I touched on, I think it's clear that the MTA really wants kind of the most bang for their buck, the plan that would make it a 2-story station. But it would appear that that's a lot more work intensive, and we'll see. It also assumes that Amtrak is up for essentially clearing out of the second floor. Now, the thought is most of their operation has moved over to the Moynihan Train Hall anyway. So there's not a whole lot of use in the space that Amtrak has right now inside Penn Station. So it'd be better used just to kind of open everything up. And as you touched on, even more kind of out there proposals. One would be to knock down the Hulu Theater, which is part of Madison Square Garden above, and use that to create a brand new entrance over on 8th Avenue for Penn Station. There's renderings of that too. The MTA has sort of indicated that might not be the best a way to go because it adds a whole lot of cost to the project. I think it adds another $1 billion to the project, and they've noted that most people are coming into Penn Station from 7th Avenue anyway, so maybe you don't get that much out of really dressing up a 8th Avenue.
Yeah.
And then there are folks who really, there's a contingent in New York City that has been pushing for years for just get rid of Madison Square Garden, knock it down, relocate it, and rebuild the original Penn Station the way it was. Obviously, this would be the heaviest lift of all of them, but they've said that anything short of that is kind of a compromise. And if you really want to get the most out of the space, it means Penn Station no longer being the basement of Madison Square Garden.
Right.
Yeah. No.
Just make it trains and nothing else. Yeah.
Well, good luck moving Madison Square Garden.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Really, you're going to use eminent domain and just get rid of the MSG like we were talking about with the post office and other places, potentially. And some of the other things that you've covered. So. All right, Alfonso, I know there's a lot more, obviously, that you're always focused on. And I know that we just want to mention for folks who haven't seen it yet, they can obviously look at also some other stories you worked on this week, which was involving Long Island Railroad conductors who, unfortunately, were giving tickets to friends and folks like that in terms of potential, kind of misconduct. And also, unfortunately, the MTA, it was reported, spent about $1.1 billion on overpay last year, and specific focus on the top earners at LIRR. So certainly, please, everyone, if you haven't had a chance to go read that reporting, you can see it obviously at Newsday.com. And I certainly we recommend you follow Alfonso Castillo at Alfonso Reports on Twitter and anywhere else that he's on social media, because he's certainly the one who's on the ground throughout the pandemic. I remember those videos of your first time on the train, and I feel like everyone was kind of living vicariously through you because that was your beat for a little while. But it's good to see that now, we're coming back, with obviously the subways kind of going back to full service, and Long Island Railroad hopefully getting ridership back up, that we're on the right path, and we'll certainly look out for all your reporting down the road, Alfonso. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, what did we learn today, John?
Learned a number of things. We learned that
a lot of stuff.
Some trains are potentially maybe a possibility, and we heard a lot of interesting and good information on the Assemblymember Ra's take on a number of important issues affecting Long Island. So another good show.
Yes.
Remind everyone to again follow social media at This Week's Long Island News, at TWLI News where you can, and follow the podcast. Thanks.
And we'd like to again thank Assemblyman Ed Ra for showing up and giving us some good information, and also Alfonso Castillo, who was really plugged into all the transportation stuff.
Yep, and Newsday, of course.
In any event, it's supposed to be a great weekend. We hope you all enjoy it, and we will see you here next time, same place, on 90.3 WHPC.